How are you? How many times have you asked that question lately or been asked that question? And of course we used to say, yeah, not bad. How are you going? And then we just go on with our day. But it's a bit more of a loaded question now, isn't it? Because we're all in the middle of this pandemic and it feels like everything's changing all the time. And we have to figure out, each and every one of us, how we're going to navigate that. And as well as the physical issues that we have to kind of navigate around, meaning each other usually, the mental health ones are just as important. And I had a pretty bad day on Friday, I must admit. It all got a little bit too much because you just hear it so much. And when you're doing jobs like ours too, you can't really turn off to it. And look, it's hard to avoid anyhow, isn't it? But I came good Saturday, but Friday wasn't the best day. And so it's important to take that time to really take care of your mental health. Now, my fabulous producer, Kat Davidson, who's getting her own show on the ABC on Saturday afternoons.
Saturday afternoons, yes. 3 to 5:30 and then 4 to 6:30 when we change over to daylight saving.
Oh, right.
Change out daylight saving.
Make sure that you're listening.
Thank you.
Tell us about you using TeleHealth, because this is what we're doing now, seeing as we can't really front up to a one-on-one chat.
Yeah, I see a psychologist often. I have some mental health issues. I suffer from anxiety and I was diagnosed with depression in late 2019. I'm not ashamed of either of those things. My brain chemistry's just a little bit hinky. And I need, there's tools that I don't have that I need a bit of help with. But when the coronavirus hit, when it was no longer possible for me to spend time in a room with my psychologist, also she was incredibly busy. Financially it was difficult. And then the option of telehealth was presented and it made me a little nervous, to be honest. It's partly the contact that I like and being able for her to read my body language and for us to share a bit of space together because it's such an intimate exchange.
Yep.
And so, but I booked a session because I wasn't doing too well, Kel. It is a lot, and I'm so grateful and privileged to be working. And for the ABC, which is an organisation I have enormous respect for. Having said that, it can be hard. We take calls day and night from people who are not doing well. We have to process a lot of information, and it started getting on top of me. And I know the warning signs, and I was seeing them. So I made an appointment to speak with her, and it made such a huge difference. It was a bit weird, and the technology was a bit funny to get my head around, and not being in the same room. But then it was just her and me. It didn't really matter that there was a screen between us, and sometimes you just need someone that has a different language to you. Who can just take what you're experiencing and put it in a different prism, a different light.
And also that if that person is like they're obviously they care and they're there to help you, but they're not personally invested. It's not like a friend having a coffee with you or even via screen or whatever it is, or seeking advice from somebody who really knows you on that level, is it? It's a very different exchange.
Very much so. And it's non-judgmental, because a lot of what I was feeling was, there's negative stuff. I felt guilty and I felt this and I felt that and I felt angry. And I'm thinking, my God, how dare I? I'm well, my family as well. How dare I have these emotions? But they're real and but there is a way to process them. And I hope that people who think, I would never do that, I don't want to talk to someone, if you're noticing that you're a bit snappy or you're whatever, that you reach out before it gets to the panic stations, because what you're feeling, I'm not a psychologist, so please don't take any of my advice apart from talk to one. What you're feeling
it's the only advice we're giving, talk to one.
Talk to one. What you're feeling is normal. And of course you're overwhelmed. It's awful. It's scary. There really is a lion chasing you, and it's got a name and it's a virus, and it is so. And I hope that now that the government, and we'll go into it in a moment what that means, that it's now more available to people, but that they will avail themselves of it.
Well, let's have a chat to Rachel Hannam, who's from North Brisbane Psychologists. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Kelly.
So the things that Kat has described, and she's described pretty much how I was feeling as well. I was very teary on Friday. And I woke up and I don't want to panic anyone listening tonight, but it might be things that you felt as well that you haven't been able to give a voice to. But I felt like I'm inevitably going to die from this, which statistically is just so untrue. It's nowhere near the truth, but we're bombarded by so much. I think a lot of us are feeling now, am I going to escape this? Am I going to get really sick? Am I going to be a statistic? What's going to happen to my family? Am I just going to be able to sit out the next 6 months? This is all big stuff, really, isn't it?
It is. And there is a name for what so many of us are feeling, and it's hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. Hypervigilance puts us on high alert. It's like an enhanced state of sensory sensitivity where we have more adrenaline and cortisol in our bodies. And our heart rate goes up and muscle tension and blood pressure and shallow breathing. And we become highly responsive to stimuli that seem threatening in some way, and we can become preoccupied with those kind of thoughts that you just described, and also just scanning our environment for any behaviours or signs or information that's reminiscent of threat or danger, even if that's compulsively scanning the news or social media for the latest updates. This is like our ancient survival mechanisms manifesting in a modern age.
And even if it's just going to the supermarket, the social distancing that has to happen, and how am I going to pass money over if that's what you're doing, or does the person there, like you are so right, you're just constantly on with, am I safe in this environment? And that's something we're just not used to.
I think so, especially in Australia. One of the psychologists in my practice has immigrated a couple of years back from South Africa. He said something interesting to me. He said, how you're all feeling in Australia now is sort of how we feel all the time in South Africa, with that level of hypervigilance. So it's not as foreign to him, that feeling. But in Australia, we're so used to being more relaxed, more trusting, and now with this hypervigilance that we're all feeling in some way or another, this slightly compulsive and obsessive sort of mind or even behaviours that we're noticing in ourselves or others can really affect our sleep, our concentration, our eating patterns, our appetite, and our energy levels, so we can find ourselves quite exhausted by it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. And do you think, Rachel, that there's a chance that there are people who are having reactions that they don't realise that's where it's from, that they're eating more, or they're a little angry, or they're wanting to have that extra glass of wine, or even if they're just oddly, strangely chipper and feeling like nothing's going in and it's all a bit dreamlike? Are those possibly ways that we're just trying to process?
I think absolutely. I had a call the other night with a dear friend of mine. Hi, Murray, if you're listening. And he said I said to him that I'm not having thoughts of anxiety or worry. I don't notice my cognitions being particularly anxious, but I'm feeling it in my body. And he texted me the next day and he said, I think I am too. I'm not aware of worry in my mind, but my body is definitely experiencing it. We're all interconnected. It would be strange if we weren't all feeling it in some way or another. Every sector of society is impacted by this, and all the different parts of society impact the other parts. It's like the Bluetooth of the brain. All our devices are connected and we're all picking up on the signals.
Yeah, from each other. Rachel Hannam is from North Brisbane Psychologists. You're on ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland with Kelly Higgins-Devine. Kat Davidson is here as well, and we're talking about just mental health at the moment, and also telehealth. Rachel, what is telehealth?
So, telehealth is basically the delivery of mental health support and psychotherapy via online platforms, so video chat or telephone if people prefer not to use video chat. So we have an app called Clinico, which we have just started to use for video call sessions with our clients, but other practices I know of are using Zoom, which people might be familiar with, FaceTime, WhatsApp. There's a few secure platforms that we are allowed to use as health practitioners. And as you just described, as Kat just described, it can be a bit strange at first. However, it does remove the travel and inconvenience barriers that some people face. And it can be a bit less intimidating for some clients because, you're sitting in the comfort of your own home, you can have your tracksuit pants on and a cup of tea. And so there's benefits and challenges with telehealth.
Do you already have to have a referral or a history of seeing a psychologist to speak to one now?
Good question. So if people want the Medicare funding for their telehealth session, they will need to have a referral from their GP. They don't need to. With the new rules that were just announced yesterday, they won't need to have seen that psychologist face-to-face before. They can go straight to a telehealth session if that's what their psychologist is offering. And for people who want to use private health or NDIS funding, that also applies to all telehealth sessions.
What are you hearing from people? What are some of the issues the coronavirus situation is bringing up for them?
Well, one of the common things is this hypervigilance that I was speaking about before, that people are having a lot of trouble staying calm. They're getting more irritable, teary, having trouble concentrating and focusing. As you mentioned, their drinking or eating behaviours might change. But I think also this is bringing up a lot of core feelings for people, the sort of strong primal feelings that we might remember having as a child, like feeling helpless, alone, lost, or anxious and insecure. And, isolation and boredom could definitely be bringing up those feelings. And I'm even hearing of people who are being re-triggered by the current situation into memories of past traumas, which makes sense to me.
Like cyclones or floods or things that may have nothing directly to what is going on, but that those things you mentioned there tie in very nicely with those past feelings.
Yeah, I think that just the feeling people have right now of being anxious or a bit lost or a bit helpless, just it's reminiscent for them of past threats or traumas they may have been through, even if they were very different to this situation.
And Rachel, I can speak from experience on that one. This has triggered an old trauma in me, but I didn't realise that's what had happened, because I didn't think of it cognitively. I didn't think, oh, this is exactly like that. Well, of course I'm upset. It just triggered. So it might be helpful for people, and part of the thing I was feeling was shame. Like, I don't have any right to be feeling this rough. I'm okay. But now that I know that's what it is, I can process it. I can stop judging it. And again, I'm not giving anyone else advice on this, but for me, it was really helpful to just to be able to recognise it and have someone say, well, here's what it is. And you're not in clear and present danger, and maybe you can help it move on.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you mentioned shame, because when we do feel helpless or lost or alone, that's very closely tied to shame, because as a child, it's like if you don't know what to do, or you don't know why you're feeling the way you are, it can easily make you feel silly or stupid or inadequate in some way. So those feelings of being anxious and lost and helpless are tied quite closely to shame. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. And Rachel, it'll be interesting as these weeks go on to see how we start feeling about this, and whether that hypervigilance starts to ebb because it becomes normal to us. And so therefore all the things that have made us hypervigilant do they ease where we just recognise it as normal?
Sure. Well, I went to a webinar the other night from the Australian Psychological Society, and one of the first things they said about that was, of course, our new normal will evolve. But if this thing goes on for 6 months or more, we can expect to see in our clients a lot of anticipatory grief, a lot of despair, a lot of burnout, grief associated with loss and death, and this chronic stress, just being at these low levels of stress for a long time. So I think we'll get our new normal, but I think it's wise to expect those challenges.
All right. And as it goes on, we'll try to help people out as much as we can, and give them something fun to listen to. And maybe that's it too, is finding a bit of joy in all this, and
definitely,
and trying to get those emotional, you can't be on a high all the time, and you don't want to be low all the time either, but you've got to find the joy, don't you?
And it's okay to feel joy. The amount of calls as producer tonight that I've got that are saying, thank Kelly for her laugh, thank Kelly for her lightness of spirit. it's okay to feel there's shame around that too. I can't feel joyful when this is all happening. Of course you can.
Yes.
Have a giggle, have a dance. Get your daggy dancing shoes out. You've got to find a way to find the... We're Australians. It's how we get through it.
I've been watching comedy on YouTube. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and this is what you do, isn't it? And but it is really important for anyone listening tonight, if you find you are starting to sort of not feel right about yourself and you're thinking, oh, there are people worse off than me, that's true all the time, and it's not actually going to help you to be worrying about the people who are worse off than you. So you need to make you okay, because there are people around you who need you and will want you to be well. So, and sometimes just a couple of chats will do the trick too. You'd be very surprised.
For sure. And I always say to people, don't forget about exercise, even though you can't go to the gym, because all that hypervigilance is adrenaline and cortisol in your body, and you need to use up that energy. So exercise.
Yeah. Well, I won't be doing any of that because I didn't do it beforehand, but...
I'm trying, Rachel.
You could
I
dance,
send her workouts.
Dance,
she doesn't do them.
Dance like Kat Feeney around the studio. How about that?
Oh, she's got so much energy, little Energizer Bunny. My dancing now is just sitting down in a chair and moving my hands from side to side. That's about it. Rachel, it's been lovely talking with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists. So there we go. So if you're starting to feel some of those things, you may not be yet, which is great, but if you do, just know that might be a part of it. It might be something else, and use TeleHealth if you can, and that's for a whole range of medical issues. So check with your GP, see when you can use it. Just makes things a bit easier for everybody around this time, doesn't it?